Social media commentator Gus Silber is joining me in studio to talk about the selfie phenomenon. Gus, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Janet.
So the selfie phenomenon, let's just take this way back to the beginning. How did selfies come to be? How did they start?
Well, okay, so there have always been selfies. People, in fact, the portraits of the self have been one of the themes in art since people first learned to paint.
Right.
In fact, if you go and look at the famous drawings of cavemen in the caves in France, they kind of would put their handprints on the wall as a symbol of saying, you know, this is us, we are here.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when art started developing visually, a self-portrait would be one way of saying this is me and this is who I am and this is my place in the world.
Yeah.
I think the selfie phenomenon that we talk about, that we can quite easily actually date back to the invention of cell phone cameras, which would be like just
Right.
before the start of the 21st century. And then the better the cameras got, the more people discovered how easy it was to turn the camera around and take pictures of themselves. So the so-called selfie phenomenon dates from early 21st century.
So it's not really a new thing, taking photos of yourself to show people that you were somewhere, you are somewhere.
Yeah.
What do they tell us about ourselves? What do these selfies tell us?
Well, the selfie generation now, and the generation actually isn't just necessarily young people,
Yeah.
but it tells us, firstly, that we're well acquainted with technology. We know how to use our technological tools for much more than they're designed for. So the idea of a phone as just a phone, that's gone. There's so much more you can do with a smartphone now, and one thing you can do is represent yourself to the world. So the ease with which you're able to do this is one reason for the phenomenon. But what it really tells us is we can control our images and we can control the distribution of our images. So we're not dependent on other people to show us our place in the world. We now kind of can show where we are and what we're doing and what we look like and how we're feeling. It's all in our control. I think that's a big part of the phenomenon.
Now, the Christ the Redeemer selfie is a hugely popular one this week. Do you think this is showing that people will go to extreme lengths to take selfies and post them on social media in hopes that they go viral?
Exactly. I think in the same way that you know, people dreamed of getting to the top of Everest. And once people had got to the top of Everest, somebody had to do it without oxygen. And then somebody had to do it faster than anybody else had done it without oxygen.
Right.
Extreme selfies of the kind that you're talking take a lot of courage, a lot of bravery, and a huge amount of ego. So if you want to get on top of the statue in Rio, you have to be the kind of person who can get away with that. And once you've done it, then there's another goal for somebody else. So those are kind of record extreme selfies that take the phenomenon to literally to new heights. But the majority of people simply take selfies of themselves in social situations or in public places where there's something happening in the background of interest.
Now, I want to get your opinion on the after sex selfie that became very popular early this year. What was all of that about? And it's still actually happening now. Why?
Well, once again, it seems to be, you know, there are no boundaries on social media.
Right.
And because there are no boundaries, people will constantly be pushing to find new ways of using the technology. And it's kind of, you know, the only surprise with it is that it took so long for somebody to hashtag it and to actually do it and to turn it into a phenomenon. But once again, the fun of it is, you know, that, you know, you're not the only people doing this. It's become a trend, and as soon as it becomes a trend, then everybody wants to be part of it. But once again, those kind of selfies do take a certain amount of, like, well, a lot of self-esteem. You know, not everyone can do that. So there's degrees, there's genres of selfies, and I would put those on the extreme, the same extreme as climbing tall places, because you're showing yourself, and you're showing the most intimate side of yourself, and you have to have a certain amount of courage to do that.
Okay, now, is this a fad that's going to die out? Is it going to transform? What's going to happen next for the selfie?
Well, no, in fact, cell phone manufacturers now have gotten on to the fact that this is one of the big uses of their technology. And the age is long gone when people would choose a point-and-shoot camera over a smartphone camera.
Right.
So cameras are getting better, they're getting more intelligent, and the selfie technology is getting into apps, so people can now kind of shoot the perfect selfie and then kind of retouch it to almost kind of cover star quality. And it's only going to get more intense because there's a possibility to make money from it. So branding yourself and branding your selfie in various ways. And because it's literally reflects who we are and it's so tied in with the way we work, it's much more than a fad. And I think it does cross a lot of age boundaries because it's so easy to do. So it's not like the yo-yo, it's not like the hula hoop, it's not a fad that will go away. partly because we are so connected to our cell phones.
Yeah.
They're always with us. And the more connected we are with them, the more sense it makes for us to connect through them.
Do selfies show that our society is becoming more narcissistic?
Well, that's interesting. That's one way of looking at it. But I think the simpler answer, the less sort of psychologically kind of complex answer, is that we have technology that allows us to do it. So it was once quite difficult to take a self-portrait. You had to set a timer, or you had to ask somebody
to
passing.
run around
That's
and
right,
hope
yeah.
that
So
it
it was
okay.
complicated, and also you ran the risk of somebody coming and running off with your device.
Right.
Now it's incredibly easy, and I think the revolution was the two directions of camera. So you just flip around the camera to face you,
Yeah.
and that just makes it incredibly easy. You can now see yourself on the screen, and that sort of mirror of yourself has made it so much easier that I think if small kids now are growing up taking selfies, you know, and older people when they discover selfies. But I think the kind of selfies that you take will reflect how you're feeling about being in a community. So a lot of people don't take selfies with just them in the picture. They'll take selfies with their friends. And the most famous one, of course, is the Hollywood selfie with Ellen DeGeneres and the whole of Hollywood behind her. If that had just been her, it would have been seen as a very self-absorbed selfie, and no one would have really commented on it. But because she managed to cram every single ego in Hollywood into the picture, it said something about celebrity, and it was a very fun image. And that, I think, is a good example of control. They don't need paparazzi, they don't need a studio photographer to come and take their picture. They will take it, and they will smile when they're ready, and they will control the image and the distribution.
That's a very interesting outlook on it. Now, is selfie culture in South Africa on par with the culture in the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think it is. I don't think much research has been done locally, but international research, definitely we seem to fit in with those trends. And I think selfies cut across cultural groups, they cut across income groups, because the cell phone cuts across all those groups. And the trend these days is that more and more people are getting smart devices, and feature phones and so-called dumb phones are being less and less used. So you'll find selfies being taken all over the place, and they're just a reflection of our society. And I think if they had to be researched, you'd probably find we were one of the most active selfie nations in the world.
Wow, now lastly, what can we learn from selfies? I feel like we've said selfies so many times, we should have a counter. What can we learn from these selfies?
Well, we can learn that, what we can learn is that selfies aren't necessarily a negative phenomenon.
I think a lot of people think they are negative.
Yeah, well, they're not negative in the sense that they're not narcissistic, they're not just people gazing inward. The whole point of a selfie is that you don't keep it to yourself.
Right.
The whole point of a selfie is that you share it. Yeah. So it's the sharing aspect that I think we can learn from. So what we can learn from is that we all have a driving need to kind of validate ourselves as people who have a reason to have a selfie taken and then to connect. I think it's an ancient instinct to say, here I am, this is me, who are you, and what are you doing? So selfies are actually a social medium like any other social medium, but I don't think really that they're negative in the sense that they are being portrayed.
Great. Thank you for coming in, Gus.
Thank you, Jennifer.